in quite a contrast to Americans whose difficulties in this area are legion. This is one of the reasons that I am inclined to view that it will be of great importance to keep social issues in sharp focus as we explore issues of linguistic diversity in American classrooms. In making this point, I'd like to briefly recall some very provocative work that was done by the psycholinguist Wallace Lambert in Canada in the 1960s. This was also language work done in a bilingual setting involving not English and French, but rather English and Spanish, but rather English and French. And in a series of experiments, Lambert presented his research subjects with a series of speech samples and then asked them to comment about the speakers. Participants in the study rated such attributes as the speaker's intelligence, their occupation, and sometimes even his or her personal appearance. These studies involved a group of fully bilingual Canadians, and in light of the French separatist movement that was to eventually gain traction in Canada, it will probably come as no surprise that he found evidence of very, very strong linguistic prejudice among his subjects. Typically, the individuals who produced the speech samples in English were judged as more intelligent, more well-groomed, better educated, and even handsomer. What was even more surprising in this situation was that he discovered that both French judges as well as English judges expressed similar attitude toward the French speech samples. In other words, it appeared that they had internalized many of the same prejudices of the English speakers toward their own language, toward their own native language. They too judged the French disguises as inferior in intelligence and so forth. A very innovative aspect of Lambert's studies was that speech samples were actually produced by the same individuals, speaking either English or French. But these same individuals were nevertheless judged very differently, depending on which language they spoke. Overall, the French disguises elicited very unfavorable attributions. They were characterized as less intelligent, less educated, and even less attractive physically. In recalling Lambert's pioneering work, we confront something, I think, that we tend to neglect a great deal in teaching language as English as a second language, or for that matter, in teaching other second languages more generally. That is, that language learning and language teaching both have critical social and attitudinal dimensions. We're in a very dynamic period as traditional social structures and hierarchies show signs of being eroded, and we receive almost daily reminders about the lack of receptivity of many Americans to the symbols of these changes. These reminders range from hateful and racially loaded caricatures of President Obama to calls for Second Amendment remedies in order to take our country back, and constitutional amendments to remove birthright as a basis for American citizenship. Regrettably, it has become an increasingly difficult environment to both teach and to learn second languages when language diversity in the classroom has become so loaded with social meaning. I'm therefore led to the view that the social dimensions of linguistic diversity will have to be understood with the same depth and rigor as the linguistic ones. In addressing this subject matter, it's necessary to keep in mind that language itself serves significant social functions beyond its instrumental value in communication. Many sociolinguists have observed, for example, that a common language can be a means of identifying and classifying people as a social entity. A common language can also be an important symbol of social identity, unifying those who speak the same mother tongue. Such unifying functions of language are only part of the picture, however. Language can also be a great divider and separator of human groups. It can be a source of misunderstanding and an impediment to cooperation and to solidarity. As Lambert's studies showed, it can also be a basis for social prejudice and social and political antagonism. As people display loyalty and allegiance to their own mother tongue and those who share it, they can be highly ethnocentric in their attitudes toward the language or dialects of others. To an often surprising extent, language prejudice goes hand in hand with social inequality. These social functions add another layer of complexity to linguistic diversity in the classroom. Since Spanish has been spoken in the West and Southwestern states, since before the Pilgrims landed, we might ask ourselves the question, why should this issue emerge at this time? I'm sure we could all offer some speculations about why this is the case, and there are probably many answers to this question. One aspect of this seems to be widespread fear among a dominant group that their own hegemony is being threatened by immigrants and immigration. This view seems to be growing despite our historical belief, the historical belief among Americans, that they tend to welcome immigrants because of the benefits that they bring.